The night before the annual meeting, the boss said the cost application for the event was too high. Why would we need so much money for a gathering? Someone must be taking kickbacks. After unanimous agreement from the upper management, they decided to replace me as the head of the annual meeting. I didn't expect that after the change, the entire company was paralyzed. Even the boss was replaced. And I was promoted. Look at what you've done. The pile of cost application forms was slammed down on the table. I was stunned. I had just arrived at the company when the finance department called me into a meeting room. As soon as I walked in, I heard the boss's loud reprimand. Look at what you've done. I thought I must have made a huge mistake and quickly grabbed the documents from the desk. Were there any errors on the cost application form? But the hotel venue, meal expenses, the venue setup, program arrangements, everything seemed fine. I checked everything multiple times and didn't find any issues. Just when I was about to ask what went wrong, the boss angrily said, "Don't you know the company is losing money this year? Why do we need so much for the annual meeting?" I was speechless. The budget was the same as previous years, and I hadn't received any notice to reduce costs. Other departments were fueling the fire. You really don't understand the company's situation. You're not in sales, so you don't know how hard it is to make a profit. The boss's face darkened more, and I realized that he was just looking for someone to vent his frustration on. I quickly bent over and apologized. "I'm really sorry, boss. I'll adjust the annual meeting costs on my end." The boss impatiently interrupted me and made a decision. The finance department will be in charge of this year's annual meeting. Everyone saw how serious the boss was about the finance department. The procurement manager immediately jumped in and took responsibility for the lucky draw gifts, saying that the procurement department had many suppliers who could offer discounts. Other departments quickly followed suit, volunteering to help finance. The company's annual meeting wasn't just a dinner to reward employees. It was also a crucial part of maintaining client relationships and showcasing the company's financial strength. A poorly organized annual meeting could affect next year's performance. The finance team was thrilled and immediately flattered the boss. "This year, we'll definitely cut the costs by 50. In the past, each department had been indifferent, but now they were all cooperating. I was frustrated because a few years ago, when I had applied for a bigger budget for the event, it had been rejected. I had worked hard to compare multiple hotels and vendors to find a good deal. The venue setup, program brokers, and private dinners all required building relationships, and yet I managed to organize the event at a reasonable cost. Other companies hosting similar events were spending twice the amount. Before I could say anything, the boss told me to get out. Back at my desk, I was still reeling from having the hot potato of the annual meeting thrown onto someone else. Organizing the event was a complex task, and it took over a month of preparation. I was so busy that I didn't even have time for a proper meal. Everyone walked by, seeing me sitting there in a daze. The finance team even walked by and mocked me. "The annual meeting is just a meal, and you dared to apply for such high costs. You never spend that much normally. But for the annual meeting, you just go all out, right?" Although no one else came over to mock me directly, whispers started circulating that I must have been pocketing some benefits from organizing the annual meeting. It was hard to defend myself. After the meeting, Madge, the secretary, quietly told me that the new finance person was the boss's sister-in-law. She was the second wife of the boss, and the first wife had been pushed out by a mistress who took the company's shares abroad. The sister-in-law was eager to prove herself in front of her brother-in-law, and she had seized on my cost application as an opportunity. She went to the boss and complained about the venue costs, the performance and photography costs, accusing me of deceiving the boss and not understanding the actual prices. The company's profits were already down this year, and a new company had taken some of the business away. The boss was looking for ways to save money. After hearing the sister-in-law's complaints, he immediately became enraged. Thinking they made sense, it was because they didn't understand the market. 5-star hotels and professional photographers were standard for showcasing the annual meeting's importance. Just as I was trying to digest what had happened, I received a call from the JA hotel manager. Has the annual meeting been reassigned this year? How did you know? I asked. Surprised. They seemed to have received the news so quickly. Then, the manager sent me a screenshot from a social media post. Some people, just because it's not their own money, spend recklessly without considering the company's situation. Now that they've been given an important task, let's show everyone what an affordable annual meeting looks like. The sister-in-law was known for enjoying afternoon tea at JA Hotel, so she had added the sales manager on WeChat. When the manager saw this post, he immediately screenshot it and sent it to the director. After all, the company had held its annual meeting at JA Hotel for years, and everyone was familiar with the arrangements. I was livid when I saw that post. Did the money from the annual meeting end up in my pocket? I held back my anger and simply replied to the JA Hotel manager, saying that we might not be working together this year, but I'd invite him for a meal next time. At the same time, I called my usual vendors to explain the situation because the end-of-year period was a good time for business, and many companies were hosting their annual meetings. Soon after, Madge sent me some screenshots. The finance department had created a new group named Annual Meeting Preparation, which included all the top executives. But I wasn't added. Other new venue coordinators and gift suppliers were in the group, and tasks were being assigned. Everyone in the group was eagerly responding with messages like, "We will complete the tasks." Madge couldn't resist commenting, "Once someone gains favor, everyone else gets promoted." I noticed that the suppliers mentioned in the group were unfamiliar to me, including FDL Grand Hotel and Most Beautiful Photography. I had never heard of FDL Grand Hotel in our city. I asked Madge where these suppliers were from. She said they were directly added by finance. Even the sales director, upon seeing these names, came over to ask me, "What hotel is this? I've never heard of it before." It was laughable. Why hadn't they spoken up during the meeting? With so many new hotels opening, do you know every one of them? I retorted. After that, the sales director stopped gossiping. The annual meeting progress was frequently checked by the boss. The finance team assured him that they were working to make sure it would be the best and most cost-effective event, and that everyone would be pleasantly surprised. The boss seemed satisfied and stopped asking further questions. When it was time to ask about the rehearsal, usually, the annual meeting was planned well in advance, with rehearsals and arrangements done ahead of time. This year, no one had received any rehearsal notices. Everyone was curious, but the finance department kept everything tightly under wraps. Even Madge privately asked me, "Do you know any details about the annual meeting?" No rehearsal. No process to follow so simple. She then realized what she said and quickly covered her mouth. Her eyes filled with surprise. I wasn't really paying attention to what she said. I was just filled with confusion. Was the finance department some kind of miracle workers? Are they sure the annual meeting can really go smoothly in one go? Even an experienced planner wouldn't dare to do something like this. Soon, the day of the annual meeting arrived. In the morning, everyone received the location for the annual meeting from the finance department in the main group chat. Umengras or Taf El de Grand Hotel. Looking at the location, it was an hour's drive from the company. But when did a resort pop up near the company? Everyone followed the location given by finance to find the hotel. The navigation showed that it was nearby, but after searching for half an hour, no one could find the so-called resort entrance, let alone the FLD Grand Hotel. Eventually, we had to call the finance department. She didn't know where to go, but after asking a man for directions, she found our car and led us on a winding path through the countryside. Finally, we stopped in front of an office building. Everyone thought the man had gotten the directions wrong. Wasn't this supposed to be a resort area? Why were we at a rural office building instead? Just as we were about to ask him if he'd made a mistake, the finance employee walked out of the building. She walked over and said, "I sent you all the location, and you still couldn't find it? Hurry up and come in." The clients will be here soon. Suppressing our confusion, we walked in. When we got closer, we saw a sign at the entrance that read Food Dealu Restaurant. Could FDL be Food Dealu? Everyone was stunned, seeing us standing still. The finance employee said arrogantly, "Hurry up. Are you just going to stand there? Or are you going to do your job?" She urged us to quickly set up the gifts and prepare for the clients. As soon as we walked in, we were even more stunned. The hall was a square self-built room with banquet tables everywhere. Red curtains hung on the windows, and the floor was covered with a red carpet. The tables were covered with cheap red plastic tablecloths, and there were plastic red stools everywhere. The round tables had packaged sets of bowls and chopsticks, and you had to manually disassemble and wash them afterward. It looked like a rural wedding banquet, the kind where you just keep serving food in a line. Then, our sales team walked in, and their director looked furious. He immediately wanted to shout, "What's going on here? Where's the sunshine? So bright. And yet I'm stuck in a pile of mud." One of the phone rings went off, and soon the phone kept ringing. Clients couldn't find the venue. Normally, the annual meeting was held at a big hotel, and the invitations sent to clients had included route and parking maps. "Hurry up. Get the clients over here. If anyone dares to upset or delay the clients, don't bother coming in tomorrow," the sales director shouted. He was regretting it deeply inside. The sales colleagues, hearing this, ran outside quickly, as no one wanted to be fired the next day. "What kind of place is this? Is your company about to go bankrupt?" A client, upon entering, complained loudly. The sales colleague was at a loss for words, sweat beads forming on his forehead, desperately looking to the sales director for help. The sales director, also sweating nervously, could only stiffly smile. "This is the latest, all-natural, organic annual meeting. Thanks to our boss's arrival. Please, let us show you to your seats." I quickly stepped in to resolve the client's question, bending my waist and smiling as I guided him to his seat. The client's face looked displeased, but, to my surprise, he endured. The sales director shot me a grateful, that slightly guilty look. I pretended not to notice. After all, he was partly responsible for what had happened earlier when he reported me to the boss. Doing my job without fail is part of my good personal work ethic. But that doesn't mean I forget. I went back to the entrance, holding the seating chart, and continued guiding the arriving clients. Suddenly, a heated argument broke out at the front. "Your company thinks it's big now. Huh? You're looking down on us at Owen Group, right?" The director of Owen Group yelled at one of our sales colleagues. No, of course not. Owen Group has always been an important partner to us, and we highly value our collaboration with you," the sales colleague stammered. "Now we can't even sit at the main table? We have to sit with some unknown people?" The other people at the table, hearing the Owen Group director, looked uncomfortable. Some wanted to argue but were stopped by those next to them. The sales director quickly ran over, sweat soaking through his shirt. Owen Group was our company's primary client, accounting for more than 30% of our business. If we offended them, his career as sales director would be over. But no one knew exactly what had happened. I kindly handed him the seating chart. "Who's the idiot who did this?" the sales director growled, crumpling the seating chart in his fist, cursing but holding back his anger. Sorry. This was a mistake from my team. Let me apologize to you, Mr. Baldrek. I'll take 3 drinks for myself tonight as punishment." The Owen Group director was still angry and remained silent. The sales director gritted his teeth and said, "The cooperation deal we talked about earlier. Perhaps we can renegotiate the terms." Upon hearing this, the Owen Group director raised his eyebrows and walked toward the main table. The sales director almost bit his teeth through. If the profits dropped, his commission would be reduced. I watched from the side, feeling a little pleased at the situation. More and more clients took their seats, and flashes from smartphones kept going off, their eyes full of surprise. Out of nowhere, the finance employee appeared next to me. She looked around at the crowd taking photos and seemed ecstatic. "Look, my annual meeting is so great. Everyone's taking photos to remember it. See, who needs a big hotel or to waste so much company money on a fancy venue? This is all a waste of company resources. Look how happy everyone is." I looked at her with disdain, but kept a slight smile on my face. Years of experience in the working world had given me a face immune to all kinds of fake smiles. The finance employee wanted to say something else. But just then, the boss arrived. She immediately put on a show and rushed to greet him. The boss's expression was as usual, though he seemed a little tense. The finance employee was trying to seek recognition, but the boss ignored her. "Boss, the annual meeting is going so well. Everyone's taking so many photos." The boss continued walking without responding, but as he saw the setup of the venue, he paused, stiffened for a moment, and everyone watched. He quickly adjusted himself, putting on a faint smile and raising his left hand to wave at everyone. If it weren't for the fact that his right hand was clenched into a fist, I would have thought he had a strong heart. When he entered, everyone gave him a warm round of applause, which finally eased his expression. Once the boss was seated, the annual meeting officially began. The host was the same handsome guy and beautiful lady from the previous year. "Next, let's start the exciting annual meeting. Please enjoy the program Dragon Rums. We thought it would be a grand, dramatic start." Instead, 5 young women, who looked like they had just graduated, came on stage. When they positioned themselves, the music started, but no one had brought the drums on stage. Some curious people stood up slightly to look. The 5 women simply pulled small drums from behind them and started playing with snare drums. Isn't that what elementary school marching bands use for flag raising or events? Someone couldn't help but laugh out loud and quickly covered their mouth. The sound of the snare drum was barely loud enough to cover the mockery around us. The boss's face had already turned stiff, his fists clenched tightly. After the opening dance, the host was momentarily thrown off, and it took someone else's quiet reminder to bring his focus back. He tried reading the script, but it was nowhere near as fluent or smooth as before. The next segment was the leadership speech. The boss stood up from his seat to walk to the stage but stumbled, probably because he had never walked on such a low stage before. The host quickly rushed over to steady him. He grabbed the microphone and was about to launch into his usual speech, painting a rosy picture of the year. "Thank you all for coming. This year, we are grateful for the cooperation of our clients and the hard work of our employees, which has made our company so." Suddenly, a curtain that had been attached to the back of the stage fell straight down, landing right on the boss's head. The host and the finance manager rushed up to help him, but the curtain had clearly not been cleaned in a long time, and dust fell from it in clouds. "Let me." The 2 of them tried to yank the curtain off, but the dust cloud was so thick that their eyes were watering, and they could barely see, coughing uncontrollably. "Hurry up." The boss's voice was filled with anger, and the finance manager, ignoring everything, yanked hard. The boss was freed but looked like a drowned raw. His hair was hanging limply. His suit was dirty and disheveled, and his face was smeared with black smudges. Before he could fully recover from the shock of the curtain falling on him, the rest of the curtains on stage seemed to tumble down like a domino effect, all of them falling at once, starting from the middle of the stage and spreading out to the sides. One of the clients looked puzzled and asked, "Is this some special segment? I've never seen anything like this before. Are they skipping rocks or something?" Fuming, the boss turned and walked off stage. The finance manager, initially frozen in place, quickly followed after him, leaving the stage in complete chaos. I exchanged a glance with another female host, thankful that we had worked together last year. She understood right away and immediately took the stage to salvage the situation. I quickly signaled the hotel staff to bring out the food, hoping to redirect the audience's attention. However, the recent events had already been captured on several phones, and many people were already sharing the gossip on social media. A group of older women started serving the dishes. Some of the vegetables had grown too long, causing them to fall off the plates as they swirled. They simply tossed them onto the red carpet. The women didn't care and just picked them up and stuffed them into their aprons. Then grabbed a piece of grimy cloth to wipe the plates, not even bothering to remove their thumbs from the dishes before serving them to the guests. It was as if even the mosquitoes were ready to congratulate us. People couldn't put their phones down for a second, snapping photos of the food service. One dish after another was brought to the table, each course proudly labeled as good service. Roast suckling pig? Stewed pork with preserved vegetables? These dishes looked more and more familiar. It was like a rural wedding banquet. Whispers of dissatisfaction began to spread. What is this? Is the company going bankrupt? Do we still need to contribute to the gift fund? I glanced at the plates on the table and noticed thick, white pork fat floating on top, which could have been there for hours. The vegetables were a mix of pale greens and yellow. The shrimp were missing heads and tails, and the fish was staring with white, bulging eyes. Someone had used their chopsticks to stir the food and found a strand of hair. At the boss's table, none of the leaders had even touched their food. Sales colleagues were constantly bending over at the tables, smiling awkwardly and trying to please the guests, their faces frozen in forced grins. The atmosphere was so cold it was unbearable. The host quickly introduced the next segment, the prize draw, which was the one thing everyone had been looking forward to. The mood in the room lifted slightly. Our company's annual gifts were known in the industry for being of high quality and value. Just one of the prizes could equal a month's salary for an ordinary worker, not to mention the cash prizes. The host, seeing the crowd's interest, began to speak louder. Tonight, our prizes are. The volume started high, but soon trailed off as his voice lowered. The female host beside him quickly checked the script and her face changed. The male host looked at me for help, his eyes pleading. I was confused. The prizes this year were decided by the purchasing department and the finance team, so I didn't understand why he seemed so off. It must have been fine, right? I forced myself to read on. Fifth prize 1 power bank. Fourth prize 1 thermos. Third prize 1 fan. Second prize 500 yuan in cash. First prize 888 yuan in cash. The room fell silent. This is supposed to be a big company, and the prizes are worse than what we'd get at a small company. Someone couldn't help but mutter. The voice wasn't loud, but in the dead silence of the room, everyone heard it. The boss, now back at his seat, heard the comment and his face turned as dark as a storm cloud. I felt a hot flush spread across my face. A big company? This was just embarrassing. I was deeply disappointed. Just then, Director Owen, who had been on the phone outside, stormed back into the room, looking more out of control than I'd ever seen him. He walked straight up to the boss and sales director and threw down a bombshell. Our collaboration is terminated. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the event. A woman followed behind, running to catch up with the finance manager. She grabbed her hand and, looking at Owen's retreating figure, said excitedly, "Mom, I want that guy to be my husband. Only a guy like him is good enough for me." Everyone in the room was stunned by the unexpected outburst. The woman wouldn't let go of the finance manager's hand and dragged her along, shouting, "Quick, give me his contact info. I need to reach him right now." The finance manager patted the woman's hand, trying to calm her down. All right. I'll give it to you once I'm done working." Meanwhile, the sales director was in a daze, barely able to focus. "We're losing money. Hurry up and refund." "You're saying this is a big corporation's annual event? It's worse than the banquets at my hometown. This is a scam." Several small business owners, who had paid for tickets to attend, surrounded the finance manager, shouting, "We paid for tickets to this event. But with the environment and the food like this? Forget 5,000 yuan. It's not even worth 500. These small bosses had come thinking they would see the big leagues, and maybe make some connections. But no one even acknowledged them. And they hadn't had enough to eat. Now they were demanding their money back. Shouting, cursing, and mocking filled the entire hall. Someone lost their balance, grabbed the tablecloth for support, and being made of plastic pulled the entire table down with it. Crash. Ceramic plates and soup splashed everywhere. The boss, seeing the chaos unfold, was so enraged he couldn't even speak, and stormed off, completely ignoring the fate of the event. The sales director followed right after him. The purchasing manager, meanwhile, was urgently on the phone, trying to sort something out. When the event organizers left, most people said their goodbyes and left early. Only those who loved gossip stayed behind. The finance team tried to keep everyone there, shouting, "The annual meeting isn't over yet. How rude of you all. Where is everyone going? Come back." The event was quickly criticized online, with hashtags like "most bizarre annual meeting" and "annual meeting must go on, gossip must never stop." The CEO and other suited-up bosses were trending for the first time due to non-financial news. Netizens joked about it being the purest, most bizarre version of an annual meeting. The PR department immediately launched a crisis management campaign, but found that the photographer they hired was terrible. Most of the pictures were out of focus or blurry, and the few clear shots showed greasy food scraps, torn tablecloths, and dirty curtains, only making the situation worse. The company's image plummeted overnight. That night, after seeing the meeting trending on social media, the hotel director called me, asking if I was being maliciously slandered. I told her what was online was just the tip of the iceberg. In reality, it was even worse. She laughed and said she regretted missing the annual drama. The next day, as I returned to the office, I heard cries coming from the CEO's office. The finance team was complaining that the annual meeting they worked so hard to organize had been a failure, with everyone abandoning it. And now they were being slandered online. She demanded the CEO defend her. "Shut up," the CEO yelled, while the finance team cried even louder. "Look at what you've done," the CEO scolded. Everyone in the office stared at her as she continued crying and shouting, "I did everything for the company." She then blamed the hotel director, saying she was upset over a small issue. The sales director, unable to contain himself, interrupted her, saying, "What small issue? She's our biggest client. There's no such thing as a small issue when it comes to her." The finance team nervously swallowed and explained, "It was just a mistake with her seating arrangement." "What about that girl from last night?" The sales director continued pressing. "It was a misunderstanding. She was just one of our invited performers." The finance team tried to explain. She knew the Owen Group was a major client, and offending them meant the CEO would definitely punish her. The procurement manager then interjected, "The prizes at the annual meeting weren't even the ones our suppliers provided. Where are the suppliers' prizes?" It turned out the suppliers had given us discounted prizes to help promote their brand. But when their staff came to the event, they discovered the prizes were completely different, which led them to confront the procurement manager. The procurement manager had handed the prizes over to the finance team before the event, yet they were swapped out. Before the sales and procurement managers could get an answer, a sales colleague rushed into the office, shouting that several important clients had called to cancel their agreements with the company. A procurement team member also ran in, reporting that multiple suppliers had canceled their partnerships. Everyone was stunned. The finance team tried to deflect the blame. "How could this happen? Are you trying to frame me? You must be doing this because you don't like me. How could one failed annual meeting cause so many clients and suppliers to cancel contracts? It must be your fault for not doing your jobs properly." The CEO, hearing this, looked at the sales and procurement managers, He probably thought the event wasn't great, but couldn't imagine it would cause such widespread damage. The sales and procurement managers were furious but had no words left. If they didn't have families and kids to support, they'd have thrown their work badges on the CEO's desk and quit. They finally realized the pain only after it affected them directly. The CEO shook his head. You think your work isn't affecting anything? Everyone here needs to deal with these emergencies. Now get out and handle it. As the sales director passed my desk, he quietly muttered, "Sorry," before quickly leaving. His shoulders were hunched as he walked away. A week later, the client issues still hadn't been resolved. A video circulating online sank the company's reputation even further. It showed a girl yelling at the gate of the Owen Group office, claiming their director was her husband and demanding to see him. When the security guard refused to let her in, she threw herself on the ground and started causing a scene. The video quickly went viral. Colleagues who had attended the annual meeting recognized her as the girl who had been causing trouble with the Owen Group director the previous night. The girl even called the finance team member mom. The industry quickly learned that the Owen Group had ended their partnership with us. But no one knew why. People speculated that the company had used inappropriate relationships to try to save the deal, leading the Owen Group to break off the partnership. As more details emerged, netizens started commenting, "Did she sell out her daughter to save the partnership?" One user posted, "What kind of company is this? It's not even a legitimate company. It's just a hookup business." Owen Group even publicly announced they would no longer work with us. More partners followed suit, and suppliers began demanding payment. The company's cash flow collapsed, and the stock price tanked. On the day the stock hit its limit down, the finance team rushed into the CEO's office with a stack of documents. She burst in, shouting, "The CEO is dead. The CEO is dead." The already irritable CEO froze, his face going blank. "What are you saying? If you can't speak properly, shut up," he yelled at her. The finance team hesitated, then mumbled, "No. No, the company. Don't talk. Just get out." The CEO screamed. "The company's being sued," the finance team said, trembling. "What?" The CEO jumped out of his chair. The finance team handed over the documents, and the CEO slammed them down in fury. "Are you out of your mind? What kind of mess have you made?" The company and finance team were being sued. The finance team had stolen the company's official seal and sold unused parts to a small factory. The factory had used them, and a machine malfunction led to a fatality. Now the company was being sued for liability. To make matters worse, the finance team had let a cleaning lady sell classified financial documents, and the cleaning lady's son worked at a competitor, who then used the documents to report us for tax evasion. The tax bureau was now involved. The CEO was absolutely livid, his chest heaving with anger. "Are you really this stupid? You single and Afshinru and the company." When the secretary opened the door, the finance officer was clutching the boss's leg, repeatedly begging, "Brother-in-law, brother-in-law, I know I was wrong. Please save me. Save me. For my sister's sake. Save me." Upon seeing the audit report, the boss immediately kicked her out. Employees, unsure of the situation, assumed the company was going bankrupt. With the finance officer being dealt with, many began to submit their resignation letters. The entire company became paralyzed. The sales director and purchasing manager, who had been secretly observing the situation, started looking for new opportunities. Before the spring festival even arrived, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. The sales director and purchasing manager finally handed in their resignations. After submitting them, the purchasing manager walked over to me and said with a sigh, "The company treated you so badly, and I didn't expect you to stay until the very end. I don't know if you're loyally foolish, or just dumb." The sales director, standing beside her, sarcastically added, "It's obvious, definitely a brainless idiot. The company's in such a mess, that even the king himself couldn't save it. Inside, I was also quite anxious and thought about looking for a new job, just like they did. But someone told me to stay calm. Could I still stay when the company was going bankrupt? I felt uneasy and picked up my phone, only to put it down again. I didn't want to deal with them. I decided that if I didn't hear any news by the end of the day, I'd leave too. That afternoon, when the announcement of the bankruptcy was expected, J Group unexpectedly sent representatives over. Over the past few days, J Group had swiftly acquired a large amount of the company's stock at a low price, making themselves the largest shareholder. They immediately held a press conference and announced an injection of 200 million yuan into the company, stabilizing the shareholders and partners. The public sentiment also settled down. Everyone was called to an all-hands meeting. People anxiously looked at the new leadership. I was the only one who was shocked to see who it was, someone I knew very well. The director of Jai Hotel. No wonder she had been telling me to stay calm. Another person who was stunned was our boss, former boss. The new leader walked to the center of the meeting room, greeted everyone, and announced some directives from the new group. Then, they issued a personnel reshuffle. The finance director was immediately dismissed. The finance officer, unaware that the company had been acquired, started shouting and causing a scene in the meeting room. How dare you dismiss me? This company belongs to my brother-in-law. He's the one who's in charge. The new leader didn't show any mercy, walking up to her and slapping her across the face. She firmly grabbed the finance officer's chin and said, "It has you betrayed the company, broke the law, and committed crimes." The finance officer, still stubborn, tried to defend herself. "You're slandering me. I'll sue you for defamation." Seeing she wasn't backing down, the new leader's secretary-like assistant took out a stack of documents from a briefcase and handed them out to everyone. The former boss, looking at the contents of the documents, grew increasingly furious, his hands shaking with rage. He rushed forward and slapped the finance officer across the face. The finance officer's face was now swollen, and blood was trickling from the corner of her mouth. The sales director and purchasing manager, fearing for her life, quickly pulled the former boss away. The finance officer crawled to the floor, picked up the papers, and frantically shook her head, saying, "Impossible. Impossible. No one should know about this. It's all lies." At that moment, a man burst into the room and began kicking the finance officer, shouting furiously, "I'll kill you. You filthy woman. I knew from when you were young that you were no good. What's all this about machine parts? Now that something's gone wrong, we're losing money. You better pay me back." It was the factory manager from the troubled factory. No wonder he was so enraged. "Darling, didn't I already give you the money? Didn't you make a lot of money before?" The finance officer said, trying to cover her head with her hands but still attempting to explain. "What money? You think the company's year-end party made money? It's all gone now. This terrible year-end party is what got me laughed at. Not only did the workers get hurt, but I've also been sued. You better make your stupid brother-in-law pay and fix this." The former boss looked like he was about to faint on the spot. No one had expected that the finance officer was the one who had taken kickbacks from the year-end party. The man's emotions became more agitated as he continued to shout and kick the finance officer. The security guards quickly stepped in to restrain him, one holding each arm. But he still yelled and cursed. The finance officer finally got a moment to breathe and asked, "Why have you been sued? You slut. You tried to seduce someone else. And now they're suing us for sexual harassment. You and your slut of a daughter are both useless." He spat on the ground. The man was the finance officer's lover. They had been together when they were younger. And when she got pregnant, he disappeared. Later, the finance officer raised their daughter alone. Years later, the man started a small factory and somehow found out she had become an executive at a large company. Seeing her as a way to profit, he started trying to get back into her life. He bombarded her with gifts, jewelry, and daily rides to and from work, claiming he had changed, that he wanted to give their daughter a complete family. The finance officer, moved by his gestures, rekindled their relationship. Now, she could bear his insults, but she was fiercely protective of her daughter. What did you say? My daughter is wonderful. It was your idea to take the money from the year-end party. The machines were your idea too. Now that things have gone wrong, you want to pin it all on me? If I die, I'll drag you down with me. She lunged at him, but she was so beaten down that she was easily kicked away. As everyone watched them fight, it became clear that the finance officer had caused all of this. If looks could kill, she would already be dead. The finance officer lay on the ground, gasping and silently crying in pain. Betrayed again by the same man. She couldn't cry for long before the police arrived, and took both of them away. Perhaps their future would be spent together in prison. The room finally fell silent. The second personnel change is the dismissal of the current president. I will take over the company, the new leader announced. This was something everyone had anticipated. The former boss tried to speak, but was immediately interrupted by the new leader. Don't try to play the family card. The day you divorced my mom, my dad died. The new leader revealed. The new leader was actually the daughter of the former boss. Everyone was shocked. The former boss, still trying to plead, was interrupted by a phone call. He hung up. But the caller kept calling. It's not about a death. Don't call me about murder and arson now. Sir, Madame has run away with all the family assets. The caller's voice was urgent and loud, clearly heard by everyone in the room. What? McGill left early this morning, taking the young master and a suitcase. It's impossible. Impossible. Everything's gone. The former boss laughed hysterically in despair. The former boss was completely ruined and taken away by the tax bureau for investigation. The third personnel change. The new leader smiled at me. Are you still planning to resign? Of course. I'll stay and dedicate myself to the company, I replied loudly. Seeing my close relationship with the new leader and my promotion, the sales director and purchasing manager quickly approached me. Look, we were so friendly before. Could we still work together? The new is never as good as the old. Look at how well we got along before. I gave them a look of disdain. Didn't you both already resign? Now get out of here. We don't need your two temples here. I immediately informed HR to process their resignation. After all, I was going to stay and work with the new boss. Postscript. After things settled down, I quietly asked the new leader how she had gotten the company's latest information so quickly. She mysteriously pointed upward. I looked up and saw a conspicuous surveillance camera. It turned out the boss's wife had a background in computer science and had controlled the company's surveillance system. She had discovered her husband's affair by occasionally checking the footage. I had to admit, that was quite clever.